Good morning. So in the last class, we have discussed about the internal rate of return, and some problems we have discussed on this internal rate of return, and they have a misconception on the internal rate of return. So calculations, see the present worth and annual worth comparisons which you have done till now, that doesn't have any issues with the calculations. But when you come to the IRR calculations, it will be different because the IRR calculations have its own misconceptions, and so these IRR values we are going to be we need to treat very carefully when you are dealing with the present worth calculations. Okay, and as well as annuity worth calculations. And here there are some misconceptions which we can discuss here. Say one is choosing the alternatives. So one is choosing alternatives with high IRR values. IRR values. See here, because the calculations which you have done in the previous class, that is finding the I value, comparing with the MERR, and which gives the high RR, that will be chosen as the best alternative. So just choosing alternatives, that is with a higher value, is also one of the misconception in the usage of IRR. And one more is more than one possible rate of return. So there will be a chance of only one internal rate of return is not possible. There will be a chances getting more than one possible rate of return. IRR means the IRR value will be having not only one value, it will be having more than one also. That is also one misconception. And one more is alternatives with unequal lies. Alternatives with unequal lies. So these are the three misconceptions which you can find in the case of IRR calculations. So we'll discuss one by one. The first one is choosing alternatives with high IRR values. So in generally, we'll say, for example, there are two alternatives. If you take this graph, say for example, what we'll do is we'll take the present worth in this y-axis, and we are going to calculate it for the different values of I, that is rate of interest. So here the present worth is positive in this case, and if you go down, this will be the negative present worth. Okay, so where the point it crosses the zero line, that is the internal rate of return as per the definitions which I have given. Say for example, we have the two alternatives, 5, 15, say 20 and 25. And if you look at this alternatives, one is, say for example, I have taken the project X, alternative X, which has the alternative, at say for example 20. And one more we have, say for example 30 and then 35. So one more project I'm taking, that which has, when you plot the project work for the different values of IRR, I'm getting like this. Okay. So here, if you look at this for the project X, this is the project X which I have taken. So I have taken, this is the project X, and one more is project Y. So this is I have taken as project Y. So when you look at the two different projects, it has a present worth for the rate of interest of 5 and 10 and so on. So these are the present worth values we have calculated at I is equal to 5, and at I is equal to 10, and that is equal to 15, and then 20. So the project X, for the project X IRR we have got is where it crosses the zero line is going to be 20%, right? So if you look at here, I have at this particular point, IRR for the project X. IRR for the project X is equal to be 20%. Okay. So and IRR for the project Y is 30%, 35%. IRR at this particular point, which crosses the 35%, right? IRR at Y is equal to 35%. So in this case, if you look at the present worth of, alternatives which have the different cash flows, we have plotted here, and then see we compare these in any case of which you have discussed in the till present worth or as well as annuity worth or internal rate of return, which one you are going to select, which has the highest worth we are going to be selected in the case of profit oriented or maximizing the profits. In that case, we are going to choose the highest present worth, which is having the alternative that will be selected. In most of the cases, we see no corresponding with the higher values, the present worth will be higher. So, but here, if you look at in this diagram, so present worth of project X is greater than present worth of the project Y. So at this particular point, see here, present worth of the X is greater than present worth of the Y. And until see up to this point, say for example, up to this point where it is say it's around 12%. Okay, it's around 12%. So up to 12%, say at this particular 5%, if you take this is the project Y, and this is the present worth of the project X. So project X is greater than project Y, and up to 10%, up to 10%. After that, if you look at that is for I is greater than 12%, for I is greater than 12%. Now project Y present worth is greater, project X present worth is lesser than comparatively until if you get to this particular value after 20%, this project X is going to be having negative present worth. So this will be compared to the project Y up to 35%. Has the project Y is going to be showing the higher present worth, So when we are going to choose, we have to be very careful in comparing this the decision which is based on the present worth and as well as IRR calculations. So that's why, therefore, we need to be associated with the I has a different range of values up to, say for example, I is for 0 to 10. I is for 0 to 10. We have the project X is the better, and for I mean 0 to 12, project X is the better. For I is greater than 12, project Y is the better. So choosing alternatives with IRR values means project Y, which shows the IRR 35%, so which gives the more present worth. So here, if you look at the project X has at lower rate of percent, which is I is 0 to 12%, which has the highest net worth, So that is why this is one of the misconception during the calculations of internal rate of return, because we are going based on the IRR 35%, where we look at this particular point of time compared to the present worth of this and present worth of this, which is going to be better, that we are going to choose this. But comparatively, see, we look at the value of this present worth at this particular point, for this IRR will be getting lesser compared to the project X. So that is one of the misconception which you are going to find, and in the case of IRR calculations. Next, we'll go to this second one. Which talks about more than one possible rate of return. More than one possible rate of return. So in this case, see, we'll take one example here. If I have a cash flow diagram, where the project, where it is switching to the positive to negative, okay, so this is the present worth of the alternative, and say the rate of interest, say I. So in this case, we'll take one alternative, say 20, then 25, say 30, then we have 35 like this. Okay. So as we plot the, for the different values of varying the I by varying the rate of interest I, and if you plot the present worth equations, say for example, if it is process like this, some of the alternatives like this, and it goes like this and then come back and then moves in this direction. See, this is nothing but, if you look at here, for this alternative, it crosses the zero. I mean, the present worth is zero at I is equal to 10%. So this is at this particular point, IRR is 10%. And at this particular point, where the IRR is going to be 30%. So it means that for the same alternative which you have drawn from the cash flow diagram, if you plot this present worth and the rate of interest equation, if the curve is like this, means when you are looking at this particular point, only at IRR is 10%. This shows this having the crosses the zero, rate of interest line at this. So present worth is at this point is going to be 0. So we are calculating the rate of interest is going to be 10. Similarly, at this particular point is also rate of interest is 30%, but present worth is 0. So here we are getting the 2 points when the cash flows are switching from positive, here positive, present worth is positive, then it is going to be negative, then the present worth is going to be positive once again. So we are switching from positive to negative, then negative to positive. It is switching more than once. So that project will be having more than one IRR. So the project which switches from positive to negative, then more than once, negative to positive, then it has more than one IRR. More than one IRR will be having in the cash in the given alternative. So this is also one of the misconception, which one I have to take the IRR for my calculations. IRR is to be 10% or IRR is to be 30%. So in these situations also we are going to find out. This is one of the misconception of the IRR. So internal rate of return. So in this case, we determine the for the once you write the present worth equation in terms of I, we can find the roots of that equation. So we can determine the roots so that the true IRR value, which one gives the consider the decision making. So here the true IRR value and which is going to be considered for decision making based on these roots of the equation. Once you write the present worth in terms of I, once you write the equation present worth in terms of I and equal to 0, find the roots of that, and then true IRR value we can be identified from this way. And some methods which help either overcoming more than one rate of return, converting these cash flows into a single direction flow. So there are some 3 methods are like this. One is I'll tell you here. One is explicit reinvestment rate method. And second one is we can call it as HERR method. HERR means it's historical external rate of return method. And third one is project balance method. So to overcome this, where we are going to get more than one possible rate of return method, then we can use these cash flows into a single direction cash flows. So then after converting this, we can use this kind of methods. There are explicit reinvestment rate of return method and historical external rate of return method, project balance method. So this is a second misconception of IRR. Next, coming to the third one, internal rate of return. Rate of return IRR misconception with what you call we have alternatives with, third one is we have the alternatives with unequal lives. Unequal lives. So here, if you look at because we use, when there are unequal lives, we have used the common multiple method, and as well as we use the study period method. So either of these two methods we have used in the case of present worth calculation, future worth calculation, and equated annuity worth calculation. Among all these three calculations, we have used this kind of method. Similarly, it has a difficulty when we use this same methods with the IRR computations. So here, generally, we use the LCM method or common multiple method, which involves business life cycles of alternatives, which is to be replicated many times. In the sense, we are repeating based on, say, one is n is equal to 3 and one n is equal to 4. To make this LCM, we have got 12. So this has to be made 4 times repeated. Means 4 times you are replicating this. 4 times this one cash flow diagram. You are replicating 4 times. You are replicating the 4 times. Whereas in this case, you are replicating 3 times the same one cash flow diagram. So here we are replicating the same cash flow diagram for many times. So that's why this common multiple method. So manual IRR determinations in such cases very difficult. In this case, IRR calculation in this case, because it gives a huge equations and it will become very difficult also. And so that is why in this case what we do is we use the PW, present worth, FW, and AW comparisons rather than this IRR method. So when you have the alternatives with unequal lives, so this IRR method is not suggestible. It is not suggestible for alternatives when the unequal lives if you have. So you can use either present worth or future worth or equated annuity worth, and so that we can choose the best alternatives. Because of the replication of the cash flows diagrams, in this case it is very difficult to go with IRR calculations. That is why we use the in our alternative to this, we use the present worth or future worth calculation or annuity worth, equated annuity worth calculations. So these are the 3 misconceptions in the IRR calculations. That is why we have not discussed the IRR internal rate of return method with unequal lives. We have discussed only with the equal lives, because when you get the unequal lives, we have to use the other methods which we have discussed till now. That is present worth, future worth, and equated annuity worth method. So these are the misconceptions which you can find in the case of internal rate of return. Now we'll discuss one more concept called cost of capital. Cost of capital. So in this case, for any business, if I want to run, say for any business, if I want to run any business without the amount or without we can say capital, without, say, we can call it in a business terms, we can call it as capital. Without the capital, we cannot run the business. So here we can say it is a both fixed capital as well as working capital. We can say it is fixed capital and working capital. So fixed capital can be on the machines and all those. Working capital can be to It will be for the liquid amount as well as for maintaining salaries or for maintaining anything. That is, we can say working capital. And here the capital is going to be pooled because we need to pool this amount. We need to pool this amount. We need to find how we are going to this capital amount. How we are going to get all this capital amount? We have to go for pooling the money. Pooling the money. So for some often it comes from several sources. So when I want to pool this money, what are the sources of pooling? Means from where I can get. What are the sources from where I'm going to get this particular money? So the sources of we have the different sources, and with the different interest. Of course, rate of interest will be there. And proportion of capital from different sources obtained at a different cost is represented by weighted cost of capital. So here, if I want to use a proportion, weighted cost of capital is nothing but it is a proportion. It is a proportion of capital. It is a proportion of a capital from different sources or various sources which are going to obtain from different sources obtained at different costs, different rate of interest or cost. So that is what we can call it as weighted cost of capital. Weighted cost of capital means the proportion of capital from the different sources which are obtained at a different cost is called as a weighted cost of capital. So generally this can be calculated. This can be, weighted cost of capital can be calculated. The weighted cost of capital can be calculated by using the equation. So here, weighted cost of capital, which I can represent as IW. So IW can be obtained from, say, for example, I have given a proportion 1 from the I1, plus P2 into I2 proportion value with the rate of interest, and so on for the different end sources. We'll be getting this. So weighted cost of capital means here, if you look at this, the I1 and I2 and so on, IN are called as rates of interest for various sources of finance, because we might have sources of finance from where you can get that there will be a rate of interest. Sources of finance. Okay, so then similarly here the P1, P2, as we told that the proportions, these are P1, P2 and so on, Pn are the proportions of total capital, proportions of total capital from the sources, meaning where we are going to get from various sources, Right. So this is the equation for weighted cost of capital. So how we are going to get from this? So if you have some examples, say for example, we have a sources X and Y, Z. We have the three sources, and with the rate of interest for this is going to be 7, and for this is going to be 9, and then for them 11. And also 20% is obtained from this source X, and 30% of the finance is obtained from the source Y, and the 50% is obtained from the, say for example, from the source Z. So then what is the weighted cost of capital? IW in this case is going to be portion, that is 20% of total is going to be 0.2 into I1, means the rate of interest is going to be 0.07%. So then plus P proportion 2 is 0.3 into 0.09 is the return. So 10 plus 0.5 into 0.11. So this is what we can say 0.096, which is taken as 9.6% is the weighted cost of capital. So the cost of capital it's not so easy to calculate. It's not so easy to calculate because we are getting the sources of finance are different. Sources of I've taken only three here, but when you take the organization or industry, the sources of capital maybe say for example sources from say we have the sources we can have the bonds, the company may have the bonds, the company may have the stocks, the company I mean the deposits in the bank deposits of course, and as well as funds, depreciation funds if you have depreciation funds, and of course unpaid taxes, bank overdrafts, all this, and loans, and if you have reinvested profit reinvested which you have, these are all the sources which you can test. So it is very difficult from all this to difficult to calculate the weighted cost of capital. So generally this weighted cost of capital, this weighted IW is used to determine the MARR. So this IW, generally the weighted cost of capital, is used to measure the MARR, that is minimum acceptable rate of return of the business alternatives which you have business alternatives. But the actual, however, this actual rate of return, that is actual rate of return, actual rate of return normally which we are going to expect is from new investment, it is greater than the IW. We expect is greater than the IW from all this. So actual rate of return is always expected from all the new investment, which are going to be the organization is made, should be more than this IW, that is weighted cost of capital. Should be more than the weighted cost of capital. So in other words, we can say any business, if I want to see actual rate of return, it should be higher than the weighted cost of capital. In any business organization, this cost of capital, who is going to determine this cost of capital? The person, we can call it as engineer, we can say engineering economist. The name we can say engineering economist, who has called as engineering economist, is going to determine this cost of capital in any particular organization. And also it will be determined by the chief finance officer, also CFO we can call as chief finance officer, which is in conjunction with the accounting department. So this cost of capital is determined by the engineering economist and as well as chief finance officer with help of accounting department. So this is how the cost of capital concept which I are going to discuss. So here and with this we are going to complete this module. Before that, we just discussed some of the sources of funds from where we can get generally the funds we are going to get in any particular organization. Sources of funds. See here, if you take say an example, say sales, this is the sources of funds which are going to get, and funds flow, and we have through sales we can get, and also from equities, and debts, and as well as say for example depreciation amount, interest on debts you have, and then retained earnings. All these are, we can say, sources of funds for any particular organization. And also gross revenue, and also some others incomes also, we can say other incomes, and then say gross revenue is also one of the amount which you are going to get. And also, of course, some operating expenses will be there and investment will be there. And we have the expenditures also. We have the state and central taxes, local taxes, taxable income, all these sources of funds, and then dividends, of course, dividends. All this we can call it as the sources of funds. So the size of pool of investment funds which you can available at a particular time, which you can say the function of many financial decisions which can be made. So here the management of any industrial enterprise, the managers is a very important factor, as well as engineers and managers both have operating units have the responsibility of proposing and as well as evaluating the investment that support the productivity operations. So proposals are usually generated and evaluated on the assumption that how much fund is available, to carry out the best one. So that is what the engineers can give out the proposals, and based on the proposals, the evaluation can be taken place. Once they evaluated the project, different proposals, and based on the funds available to carry out this best alternatives, we are going to take the decision. So this is about the sources of funds, how the funds can be obtained from the, different sources in a particular organization. So with this, I'll stop today as we have completed the module 4.